Good evening, folks. I want to introduce Representative Angel Ramirez from Cedar Rapids in Lane County. She represents House District 78. She was elected in a special election, I believe, April of last year. So welcome. We appreciate you being here and part of our process. And without further ado, Representative Ramirez, I'm going to give the floor to you for 5 or 6 minutes.
Thank you
Thank you.
so much. Hi everyone. My name is Angel Ramirez. As was mentioned, I was elected last April in a special election where we made history in my community. I represent Cedar Rapids, but part of our campaign really was focused on how do we represent all people in Iowa and how do we represent marginalized communities that have been kind of left in the dust by this legislature in Iowa in our state government. So our community elected me as the first Latina in the Iowa State Legislature. I like to say I am proud to be the first and I will not be the last. Part of my story is recognizing the mixed emotions that came with that win that our community did. And that's because it was 2025 when I was elected. And we have a growing Hispanic population, and we have a federal government, a state government that is seemingly hell-bent on attacking people who are different than the status quo, different than the majority. And part of what my community said was, in the face of that, we're going to choose hope. In the face of that, we're going to choose human-centered policy. And because of that, we had the largest overperformance in a special election across the country at that point in time. And I think that shows that people are ready for something different. They're ready for a strong voice. They're ready for us to focus on policy that actually helps our neighbor. I like to say also that, part of what I'm proud about my community and communities across Iowa that are standing firm in the face of hateful legislation, in the face of our cancer crisis, in the face of us single-handedly destroying our public education system is that people are ready for something different. And we need to focus on policy that actually helps the neighbor that we've never met. We can all, make sure that we are, as electeds, where we have a point of privilege, we have a point of power, and we need to do everything that we can to be helping our neighbors that we will never meet, but that deserve help because they're human beings. And so some of the most important policies to me that I've fought for in the Capitol and have been advocating for is the fight for civil rights, the fight for public education, the fight to ensure that every member of our community, whether they've made mistakes, whether they have come into our community, as new individuals, that they can re-enter our society if they've been previously incarcerated, that they can find a home and jobs and healthcare here if they move here and choose to build a home here. And lastly, I believe we need to protect our environment. We need to protect our water, soil, and air because without those things, there is no future. And as part of the younger generation, I'm worried about my future. I'm worried about the fact that my friends are leaving the state, given the political climate, and also given the fact that we are quite literally not taking care of our climate. And that's, of course, feeding into our cancer crisis. So these are all cyclical issues. I see them as interconnected with one another. And in order to effectively enact change, we need to elect policy leaders and community leaders that deeply understand the intersectionality of these issues and can be able to understand what's at stake here. If we don't get our stuff together and pass some helpful legislation that'll actually change the direction that Iowa is going in. I moved out here from California. I grew up in California and then I moved to Arizona when I was younger. And then I came from Arizona to Iowa, to Cedar Rapids to go to Coe College. And that was the best decision I ever could have made. Coming to Cedar Rapids, I was surrounded by people who really invested time in their community, both in my college campus, but also outside of that. I had the privilege of working on some presidential campaigns, working on some local elections, and I saw the beauty of what Iowa community has to offer. I saw what Iowa Nice actually meant, right? It's more than giving the shirt off your back, it's building the shirt, right? It's creating the shirt to begin with. And that's why I chose Iowa as my home. That's why I chose to live here, and build a chosen family here, as I like to say, with my friends and my community. These are all really important things to me, and I want to be able to carve out, space for future generations to want to stay in Iowa. I've met so many people who have lost their children to moving out of state, their grandchildren are moving out of state, and it is leaving our community desolate. And we need to be building up Iowa to a point where people will want to stay here, invest their time, energy, love, and community here. So hopefully that gives a little bit of an overview of what I care about and what I seek, in reelection.
Well, thank you, Representative Ramirez. I'm going to give the floor to Patrick. He's the chair of our Election Endorsement Committee. He'll ask you a couple of questions, and you and I all finished up in the last couple of minutes. Then, Patrick, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mitch, and thank you, Angel, for joining us this evening. So, as you know, part of the vetting process was you received a questionnaire and responded to it, sent it back. We reviewed it. Now we have a couple questions for you that we'd like to ask further beyond that. So, first question was education question number 2, where it asked how much power you believe the Department of Education should have over school decision making. You answered that the Department of Education should set strong baseline standards for equity, safety, and curriculum quality while allowing local districts meaningful autonomy, but that the legislature and the Department of Education's actions are preventing that. So please now tell us how we can ensure the Department of Education sets standards for quality curriculum without dictating curriculum.
Yeah, this is a great question. I've served on the education committee over the last few months. And one of the things that I've noticed is that we are passing legislation that is giving the Department of Education much more authority over curriculum, much more authority on checking things like reports and data, and then not just keeping it as looking over data, but then taking it a step further and saying that the DE can then penalize local public school districts. And it's never private schools. It's never private schools, and it's rarely charter schools. And I think that's an important piece of the conversation, because when we're talking about setting standards for equity, so what that means to me is making sure that we're following federal and state code in terms of civil rights protections. But I also think that as the Department of Education, you should have the authority to be able to say these vulnerable student populations, let's take, for example, LGBTQ plus students, where we know LGBTQ plus students in Iowa face higher rates of mental health crises. Allowing the DE to say, okay, school districts, you need to ensure that you are actively or proactively trying to address mental health concerns with your student populations with consideration of vulnerable populations that are more at risk for mental health issues. Having that standard alone still allows local community school districts to say how they're going to do that. It still allows community school districts and public school districts to be able to dictate how they're going to collect that data, what their local policy is going to be. And I think that also comes down to curriculum as well. It's right now we're seeing the opposite end of what I would like to see. We're seeing a DE that has too much authority and the state legislature is dictating what is appropriate curriculum or not. But what we know to be true is that that curriculum that the DE has put forward has been hurting student populations. And so that should be a huge indication that we're taking a backward step and we need to be taking a forward step. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Awesome.
Okay, so the second question is environment question number 2. And it asks what the legislature should do to reduce water, air, and land pollution. You answered that we have to strengthen and enforce water quality standards, hold large agricultural operations and corporations accountable with meaningful penalties, and fund restoration of the pollution through a polluter pays framework. So please now explain how you envision a polluter pays framework working, and what happens if a polluter business files for bankruptcy in lieu of paying the pollution it caused.
Okay, so I'm going to try to tackle this as best as I can, but it's super multifaceted in my brain. So there's a few things that we can be doing as a state to ensure that our water quality, our soil quality, our air quality is the best that it can be. And we're not doing those things like mandatory cover crops, for instance. And we're also not requiring big ag to do a lot of those things. There's not as much regulation on big ag. Now, why this has to do with the polluter program or is because currently the state legislature is trying to pass legislation in which it would protect big pollutants. So I'll give you an example. There is a bill that essentially would require you to know exactly what percentage of fecal bacteria belongs to what animal before you can actually hold any corporation accountable. So I take a cup of water from Lake McBride, and I have to be able to say, based on this legislation, well, 2% of the bacteria that shouldn't be in here belongs to geese. 3% belongs to cows, 5% belongs to swine. And only when I have that full breakdown am I allowed to hold any of the pollutants locally accountable. That technology doesn't even exist. That science doesn't exist. So, what I would suggest is being able to say, okay, we know that this water is polluted, right? We know that this soil is polluted. We have the science, we have the data to back that. What are the local contributors? And how do we ensure that big corporations that have less regulations are able to be held accountable for that? I feel like big corporations should have to pay their fair share. I believe in a tax the rich, progressive tax structure, and that includes being able to include the costs of the local energy costs that are rising because of big pollutants through data centers. That includes having a higher tax on big ag with these huge farms that are honestly, like a lot of them are using labor trafficking to be able to cut costs. And at the same time, they're polluting our air, our water, and our soil. In order to do that, we really need to have a Secretary of Agriculture that is willing to hold big ag and big farms accountable, and also be able to help local family-owned farms to do a lot of the sustainable practices that I know that they want to do. I've talked to these farmers, they want to do it, but there's not enough subsidies, there's not enough incentives to be able to do that. So I see it as a multifaceted approach of we have to be proactive in our incentivizations, our subsidies, and we also have to be able and willing to hold the big corporations accountable when we know from science, from the science of the soil, the science of the water, that they are polluting our precious resources.
Thank you.
If that makes sense. I try to fit that in as succinctly
Uh,
as possible.
Patrick, so I think that's it with questions. So what I'm going to do is give you like 1 minute to close it out on your end, Representative Ramirez. Then I'll take a minute to kind of explain the process over the next few days here.
Okay, well, I just want to say thank you so much. I love talking about things that can help people. I love talking about policies that can help people. And at the same time, I'm newer to the legislature, so I'm learning every day. I'm a big believer in being a lifelong learner and learning from communities other than my own so that we can make sure that we're really tackling the issues of today as creatively and as effectively as possible. So I appreciate the time and you know I have this tattooed on my body. It means a lot to me. It says "Tu lucha es mi lucha." Your fight is my fight. Your struggle is my struggle. And really, that's what I believe my campaign and our communities are seeking right now. We're looking for people who are in the fight because not because it's their own, but because it's the right thing to do. So thank you.